We'll figure it out. We'll use the Force.
That's not how the Force works.
Hello and welcome back to episode 11 of Unlimited Limited, the show where we talk about Star Wars Unlimited's draft and sealed environments. So this week I actually did my first draft of Legends of the Force and it was a great time, so I figured we could talk about it. This is going to be a shorter video because I'm going to be filming it at the same time as I film a Galactic Championship video, which I'm actually going to. Currently it is the Sunday before the Galactic Championship and I'm very excited to be flying out to Vegas and competing. But that is for the next video, so we will talk about that when we get there. But first, let's talk about my first draft of Legends of the Force. Now, of course, one draft isn't enough to build, an exact profile of how everything is going, but we'll talk about general thoughts, what worked and what didn't. I ran Supreme Leader Snoke with the yellow base. There's a common consensus, I think, it's still very early, so unsure, but that yellow is the weakest color in this set for draft. I think I agree. I noticed that at pre-release that people were playing a lot of decks and not a lot of them had yellow in them. I'm still working out exactly why that is, but I do think I agree that a lot of the very strong cards are in red, are in green, and some of them are in blue. And I think that yellow has a couple of strong cards, don't get me wrong, I think Qui-Gon is one of the best bombs in the set, but that's a legendary, right? So I think that generally yellow is probably the weakest color, but nevertheless, it's not like so weak that you never drafted, right? And that is actually a problem or a mistake that I made. My first pack that I opened, the pick I ended up taking was Purge Trooper, which is that 3-cost 4/2 that I think when played deals 2 damage to a Force unit. And that card is very much not a first pickable card. And in my defense, that pack was incredibly weak, and I think that that probably was the right pick. But then through pack 1, I was taking a lot of green because Snoke was really the only leader that I drafted that I was super interested in playing. Partially because I didn't get to play him at pre-release, and partially because I know that he's quite strong in Limited. So I was taking green, and I was taking red because of that first pick Purge Trooper, and because the only other color that seemed to be kind of open was yellow, and I had sort of this notion in my head that yellow was the weakest color, which is, again, probably true, but not weak enough such that you should never draft it. So I ended up pivoting into yellow in pack 2, and that made it a little bit later, and I missed out on some goodies that I would have otherwise gotten. So don't be afraid to play the weakest color, especially if it's as open as it was for me this past week, which was to say very open. Don't be afraid to play weaker colors if they are open, because an open yellow is much stronger than a contested red or blue in the set, or green. So that was my first mistake for sure. And honestly, the biggest mistake I made in this draft was, that late pivot, which was partway through pack 2. But let's talk about the deck that I got, because it still actually turned out to be quite a strong deck. So we'll go through one card at a time and talk about sort of, how it played out. Exegol Patroller was a risky card just because Mother Talzin is a very strong leader in draft this format. And of course, anything that can, ping or give something -1/-1, like Mother Talzin, is going to be a real problem for cards like this. Because, of course, best case scenario if your opponent's playing Mother Talzin really is you get in for 3 and then they just kill it with the leader ability. They don't even have to use a card for that. All they need to do is attack with a Force unit, which most well-built decks will have, 2-drop Force units. Which is another thing I'll mention about this deck. You may notice as we go through, there are very few Force units. And that actually ended up being okay for this deck, but in general, that's not going to be the case. Next we had Mysterious Hermit, which I don't think I played one time, so I'll just skip through that. Next we had Sith Legionnaire. This card actually was a little bit better than I expected. Like I said, 2/4s or 2/2s are very poor in this format just because there's so many good 2/4s. But your opponent isn't always going to have one of those on turn 1. And if you play Sith Legionnaire and your opponent doesn't immediately, trade with their 2/2, and then you're able probably to play a bigger unit and attack like base for 4, then next turn they kind of do have to deal with it, and now their base is down 4. Like, that is pretty good. Now, I'm not going to say this card is incredible, because it's not. Although it does have synergy with Snoke, of course, because you can make it a 5/3 pretty easily on turn 2. So it is not bad, but it's definitely something that you should be a little bit careful about, because, of course, if your opponent does play like a Yaddle or the Night Sister one, or if they're hit a rare, I guess Yaddle's a rare, or Gunji or something like that. That's a real problem. Gunji's always a real problem for this card, of course, because 2/5 is just such an insane stat line. But we all know that Gunji's good, so I will keep talking. Vinay was a card that I thought was going to be pretty underwhelming, but I actually liked it a lot in exactly the Snoke deck. I don't really think it would be good anywhere else. I mean, it would be good in that it's a 2/4, and a 2/4 stat line is good, but like this text was actually pretty relevant often, because I could kind of get double value out of experience counters, which happened pretty regularly. Like I would put an experience counter on, say, Sith Legionnaire, and then I would attack with Vinay and move the experience counter, or after attacking with Sith Legionnaire, I would attack with Vinay and move the experience counter to Vinay, and then I would have gotten double value off of that experience counter. I'm not going to say it was the most busted ability in the world, but it was actually, it was good. It was good. I liked it. And of course, it was a dark side ability, or unit, which was good for Sith Legionnaire. So Consumed by the Dark Side is a card that it was just kind of a relic of the fact that I pivoted in pack 2, so I did not have enough playables. I don't think this card is good, and I think I always resourced it. There is a time for it, definitely, if you really need to push a little bit of extra damage, I guess, but really you probably shouldn't be playing this card. Same with Tip the Scales. It was just oh boy, I need playables, and this is a card that I can play, and I never did, because if it could hit units and only units, I actually would probably play this card. But the fact that it hits your opponent's probably weaker cards, unless it hits exactly removal, the only time this card is good is when it hits removal in limited, really. Because if you're building a good limited deck, it should basically be almost entirely units. So this is going to whiff often, and when it doesn't whiff, it may take... Maybe you get a lightsaber, maybe you get some random pump spell, or some other random nonsense that they're playing. The only time it feels good is when you get a removal spell. I don't think I actually played this card once. I just resourced it every time. I'm just reiterating the fact that I don't want this in my deck. It just sort of showed up in my deck. On the other hand, though, Inquisitor's Lightsaber was actually pretty good. The 3 toughness boost is very big, especially whenever you put it on something like Snoke, right? And it's a 5/10 that attacks Force units. It's a 7/10, right? Which I think kills basically every leader in the set. It kills Kenobi, it kills Talzin. Yeah, very, very strong. And great thing to put on Sith Legionnaire, because if you have another dark side unit, now it's really big, and the HP boost is very relevant. Yeah, it's just a solid card. And again, yeah, especially with Snoke, because you can keep stacking stuff on, and because removal is such a premium in this format, oftentimes they won't have anything to deal with it if you can just make one unit really big, and this helps with that. I'm hyping it up a little bit, and I don't want to hype it up too much, because it does still have that problem of oh, I attach Inquisitor's Lightsaber to it, and then your opponent goes, oh, okay, I have Shatterpoint, and then you just get 2 for 1. That happens, and that sucks. So don't play this card super highly, but I got okay value out of it, because again, removal is so scarce. Pilia's Star Compass, on the other hand, is an equipment that I actually am really happy to play. Inquisitor's Lightsaber, I'm okay to play. But yeah, Pilia's Star Compass is one that I will take happily. Next we have Knights of Ren, and I had 3 of those. And it's a 3-cost 4/4, and that's it, of course. This card was insane. It's very good just on its own, of course, but it's even better in Snoke, because oftentimes what you're able to do, if you have 3 of them in your deck, which again, that's 10% of my draft deck, is just Knight of Ren. And that's pretty incredible, right? So what you can often do is turn 2, play a Knights of Ren. Turn 3, use Snoke to make your Knight of Ren a 5/5, and then play a second Knight of Ren. And again, you're not always going to be able to do that, but when you have 3 of them in your deck, again, when 10% of your deck is Knight of Ren, you can do that sometimes, and when you do, it's insane. You have a 5/5 and a 4/4 on turn 2, and the 5/5 is ready. Or sorry, on turn 3, and the 5/5 is readied. That's pretty incredible. Obviously, we all know Knights of Ren is great, so I won't spend too much more time. And hey, it's a villainy unit for Sith Legionnaire. Wow, exciting. Yeah, great card, and I would happily play 3 or more of them. Next, we have Maz Kanata, which I still think is a great card, I will say, as a disclaimer to what I'm about to say. Maz Kanata is a great card, even first pickable in some packs. I mean that, I believe that. But you may have noticed that I have basically no Force units so far, and that doesn't really change. Maz Kanata is still just a 3-cost 3/4, which is good. That's good stats, but obviously you want that 1 plate ability. and I just couldn't always get it. Sometimes I was just playing her as a 3-cost 3/4. So in this deck, she ended up not being that good, other than, again, the stats just being fine. But I still think that she's a card that you should take highly, and I'm not going to like knock her reputation as like a card you should take highly just from this one experience, because honestly, my bad for not building enough force units. I built what the packs gave me, except for, again, maybe pivoting into yellow a little bit too late. But yeah, I just didn't get there on the force units, and Maz was just okay, but I do still think that she's a great card. So keep an eye out for her in the future. Definitely even first pickable in some packs. Nile Marauder, this card was also very good. I mean, it was basically a 3-cost 4/5 a lot of the time. We'll say it doesn't play super nicely with Snoke because it does hold experience counters well, and it is a villainy card, so in principle Snoke can target it. But if you have basically any other unit on the field, he's not going to be able to, because Snoke always sees it as a 1/5, right? So even though it isn't. But, if you can get an experience counter on it, it attacks as a 5/6, and if you get 2 experience counters on it, it attacks as a 6/7, and that's pretty exceptional. Next we have Shin Hati, which I was very impressed by as well. So the shielded on a 4-attack unit on turn 2 pretty much always got me like ridiculous value. I was pretty much always just able to completely delete their turn 1 play, or even sometimes their turn 2 play, or even sometimes their turn 3 play. Not always, but sometimes. And then I was able to do something else as well, because that's just popping the shield. Now, also Shinhati is a force unit, which is good, because obviously we want some of those to get the force with us here. But hey, she can be tutored by Pileo Star Compass, which is amazing. But yes, so great unit, we all know that. And then of course I will skip ahead a little bit and talk about Balin Skull at the same time, because they do have some synergy, which makes sense. They're master and apprentice in the show. And yeah, you're able to just get some value off of Shinhati's shield, and then just bounce it and play it again immediately for free with Balin Skull. Like, that's pretty exceptional. Especially because Shinhati will give you the force so that you can use this ability. Very good. The hidden didn't come up that much. In fact, there were actually a couple of moments where I was like, I wish this didn't have hidden, because I want my opponent to hack it, because they don't know that I have Balin Skull in my hand, right? And I'm just going to, bounce it. But that's still neither here nor there. Again, 3-cost 4/2 shielded with the force tag. Quite exceptional. Next we have Tusken Tracker. This card, this line of text about hidden basically doesn't matter at all. It's pretty much just a worse Knights of Ren. It doesn't have the villainy tag for Snoke, and it's sometimes a 4/4, whereas Knights of Ren is always a 4/4. I think it's fine. It's decent filler. It's okay. Being a worse Knights of Ren is still okay, because Knights of Ren is quite good. But in general, this is I probably gave it a C in the set review, and it feels like a C. It's fine. Next was Overpower, which I've talked about before. I really don't like this card in this set, and I think I resourced it every time, so I won't belabor that. We had 2 Charging Philax in the deck. This card was very, very good. Once again, the hidden didn't come up much. Again, in fact, I wish there was one time where I wish my opponent actually could attack it. But yeah, just we all know that ambush is the strongest keyword in draft, and especially when it's on a unit that's cheap like this, you can just pretty cleanly clean up a lot of your opponent's turn 1 plays, a lot of your opponent's turn 2 plays, even a couple of your opponent's turn 3 plays. Charging Pillac just does it, and sometimes will stick around. The card's great, and I would be happy to play 2 or maybe even 3, unsure. But yes, cool card. So next, I want to spend a little bit more time talking about Shatterpoint. And you'll notice it's out of aspect, so I was playing it for 6. Now, getting this out of the way, if you can play Shatterpoint for 4, it's exceptional, and you should do that. If you can play Shatterpoint for 4, it is so good. First pickable, incredible card, especially if you get there on the force. But what my experiment here was can you play it for 6 if you don't get there on the force? If you do get there on the force, can you play a 6-cost Vanquish in draft? The answer is probably yes. I mean, removal's good, Vanquish is good, and especially in this set when it's at such a premium and there's all these lightsabers everywhere and you have so much 2-for-1 potential with your opponents, I think Shatterpoint's a great card if you get there on the force. But the experiment that I was running really is, and I say it was an experiment like it was deliberate, but it was just kind of how the deck building went, is can you run out of aspect Shatterpoint if you don't really get there on the force, if you can only sometimes do that? And my hypothesis going into it was yes, you could, because removal is such a premium and you can pretty much just hold it till whenever you need it, and even if it takes you a little bit longer to get the force, eventually it will still be very good. However, I was a little bit surprised. One of the big pillars of my surprise, though, came from Jump to Lightspeed, where I always pretty much would play direct hit. Doesn't matter what color I was in, I was playing direct hit for 4 if I was in blue, or direct hit for 6 if I was in any other color, right? Or if I was in non-blue, but that was always worth it. I was always happy to play that for 6, and in principle, that's a worse Vanquish because it's restricted, right? But the fact that it always dealt with, because pilot leaders were so strong, anything that could help me control the space arena to either stop or delay an opponent from flipping their leader as a pilot was good. And I was always happy to even first pick direct hit in most packs, actually. But Shatterpoint, I knew wasn't going to feel as good as direct hit, just because, as far as I can tell, there's nothing quite as dominant in this set as pilots were in Jump to Lightspeed. But I figured it would be kind of close still. And I think it actually wasn't. I think if you don't really get there on the force, and you're not in blue, then I don't really think you play this card. And I know that may seem like no shit to a lot of people. They're like, oh yeah, obviously. I mean, it's a blue card that cares about the force. So if you're not in blue and you don't have the force, then why would you play this card, right? And I think that that's a fair point, but I still wanted to try it out because, of course, removal is very strong. And, you know, sometimes jumping through extra hoops, especially in a set, like I said, with such little removal and so much blow-up potential with lightsabers, maybe it would still be worth it. Did I ever play this card? I think I did once and it felt good, but I actually, and this is crazy to say, but I resourced it more than I played it. And I just think that's maybe how it'll go if you are in a situation like I am here. Now, of course, if I got there on the force, even if I wasn't in blue, I think it would have been a lot better. But oftentimes I just couldn't do it. It's an interesting spot to be in. I did have Snoke, and Snoke, you know, flips on 6, and you can only play Shatterpoint for 6 in this set, and Snoke can give you the Force. But, you know, I had other stuff I wanted to do with the Force as well. You know, Daggering Master, Balan Skull. I had other stuff that was fighting for the Force. So I guess in the future, will I be trying to play this card in decks like this? Maybe, but not as likely as I thought it was going to be. You know, I went into this going, oh, Shatterpoint's going to be an amazing card in my deck. But I think I was wrong. I think it was an okay card in my deck, and that is very interesting to me. So I'll definitely follow that, and I will probably be drafting a lot more Shatterpoints in probably non-blue decks, so I will keep you guys posted with how that goes. You know, my next experiment would like to be, if I'm not in blue, but I do get there on early Force stuff, is Shatterpoint good? And my hypothesis is yes, it will be very good, but we will see. I've already talked about Balan Skull. Again, solid unit as the Force, synergy with Shinhati, and a bunch of other stuff as well. It's cool synergy with Charging Philak, a lot of cool synergy. But of course, you do need the Force. Next, we have Dagoyen Master, and this is another one where I was like, is this going to be good enough in a deck that doesn't really get there on the Force? And the answer for Dagoyen Master is yes, absolutely. 5 cost 5/5 is decent, and it has the Force tag, which is good. But a lot of the value of this card comes from its 1 played and 1 defeated. You know, in the best case scenario for this card, which is really not that difficult to do, you get 2 searches off of it. And in a 30 card limited deck, and especially by the time you play Dagoyen Master, whenever your deck has, like, you know, probably just over 15 cards left in it, searching the top 5 of your deck is almost like a third of your deck. And the fact that you get to do that twice, you basically just get to get whatever you want out of your deck. Sorry, whatever unit you want out of your deck. But, you know, usually a Force unit is going to be the best card in your deck unless you have some crazy removal. And the fact that, so for me personally, when I played this card, I don't think I ever got the when played effect, but it enables itself for the when defeated effect. You know, you attack into something big and you trade, but when you attacked because it's a Force unit, you get the Force and then you get the when defeated ability. And even just getting to do it once felt incredible. If I got to do it twice, that would be crazy. Now, I think this card is very, very good, and if your opponent plays one, and they use the Force to do the when played thing, you should be trying your absolute best to keep them off the Force and kill this before they get the Force, because that is just an absolute beating. I wish I was able to do that, but sadly, like I said, I pretty much only got the when defeated just because I didn't have enough Force for the when played. But great card, and I was going to say first pickable in some weaker packs, but I actually think it's first pickable in like even some packs that are not that weak. I think this is a very first pickable card, and one that and also just because, again, the aspect is there's no alignment, heroism or villainy. You can play this in either heroism or villainy. No, I think this card's exceptional, and I would be very, very happy to play it again and first pick it even. Next, we had HK87 Assassin's Droid. This card was not good, and I resourced it every time. Again, it was just kind of, I needed a card, so there it is. Next, we had Relic Scavenger. This one was very interesting, and I always was like, oh yes, I finally get to get the Force, because they're holding a lightsaber. But no, they do not have the Force tag, but I just kind of assumed, I was like, oh, well, holding a lightsaber must mean Force, but alas. You know, General Grievous, I don't think, has the Force tag, and he has lightsabers. There's a lightsaber in the Terrent Tech art, but it's not Terrent Tech holding the lightsaber, although that would be awesome. But anyway, I'm getting off topic. 5 costs 4/6 with Restore 2. How good is that? No Force tag, sadly. It is pretty good. You know, your opponent is going to have to deal with it, because if you play this and they kind of try to ignore it, unless they're like really close to closing up the game, you're going to be able to kill basically all of their smaller things one at a time with this and restore 2 each time. You know, 4 is enough to deal with a lot of earlier threats, and 6 is enough to stay alive while doing it. And the restore 2 every time means that it's going to be very difficult for your opponent to race this card. And so I think that your opponent is going to want to deal with it. And that is my experience with it. When I played it, I think I got like usually 1 attack off with it before my opponent dealt with it. And I was okay with that, because that's damage that could have been going to my base, or could have been going to another unit, and I also usually got a restore 2 out of it. It's fine, like it's not first pickable by any means, but like I think this card is like definitely a threat. Now let's talk about cards that are exceptional, which is Terrent Attack. Now I didn't have any Force units in my deck, and I did that for anti-Terrent Attack synergy, and not just because I didn't draft enough Force units. No, it was so I was playing around Terrent Attack. No, but this card is exceptional. It's basically always going to be a 5-cost 5/5 ambush. So it's going to be a 5-cost removal spell, basically, that leaves behind like a 5/2 or a 5/3. Like, that's just going to be so good every time. It's first pickable in some packs. It is a card that you want basically as many copies as you can draft. I would play like 4 of these things, maybe 5 of these things, right? Like, if you can just slam Terrent Attack reliably on the 5 resource turn, you're putting your opponent pretty far behind. Great card. I wish I could have had more than 1, but, you know, beggars can't be choosers. Although I did get it like pick 6 or pick 7. That was pretty cool. Good. So next card is Legacy Run, which is a card that I was interested in trying out because it's a legendary. That's so cool. And that is part of the reason why I drafted it and put it in my deck, but not the entire reason. I mean, you know, it does have that like kind of, whoa, this is a legendary, so cool, you know, that kind of appeal, but it is also just like a fine card in its own right. Oftentimes it is going to be a 2-for-1. Sometimes it'll be like a 3-for-1, and that is good, but it didn't really feel as good as I would expect like a 3-for-1 to feel. And I think that's just because it is a little bit slow. It's a slow 3-for-1, right? Because your opponent can see it coming, they can play around it. Maybe they take different trades when they see you play it because they're assuming your first action is going to be run that into whatever space unit that they have. I had it against an opponent who had that rare ship that was a 3-cost 3/4 that gets an experienced character when you attack it. That ship is crazy, by the way. And I just ran Legacy Run into it, you know, put the 2 on it required, and then the 4 on the ground. I think I killed one of the units, and yeah, that felt fine, but, you know, it was a lot of setup, and also it was a lot of actions, and it was just slow, and my opponent could play around it. That being said, it's not like a bad card. It absolutely can be a good blowout, but I don't think it is like, this is going to sound crazy, but I don't really think it's a first pickable card, you know. If you're playing to like take cool cards and play cool cards, then I think you should first pick this card. But if you're playing to get like as many wins as you can, I actually think that you should, you know, consider this card. But if there's like a Terrent Attack in the pack, or like a Daggerian Master or a Shatterpoint, then I think you just take that over Legacy Run. Although, which sounds crazy to say, right? Because, whoa, it's a legendary, right? But, you know, there are a lot of uncommons and even commons that I think are better than it. But, you know, it's still a cool card, and I'm glad I got to play around with it. Next up, we have Craving Power, which is pretty much the best card in my deck, I think. This card is insane. They call it Overwhelming Barrage at Home, is what I've heard, and I totally buy that. Obviously not as good as Overwhelming Barrage, but that's a easy bar, you know. Being as good as Overwhelming Barrage would be so insane. But yes, Craving Power is exceptionally good, so much so that I actually would play it for 7 and did play it for 7 at pre-release, but in this deck I could play it for 5. And that was awesome. Just putting Craving Power on Snoke was ridiculous because I got to hit something for 6 immediately with Craving Power, and then attack with Snoke for 7 because he gives himself an experience counter. And yeah, this card is ridiculous. It gives you reach into space, which you oftentimes are ignoring. It lets you kill something big. It's a buff that sticks around. I've already talked about this card. This is an easily first pickable card and one of the biggest bombs in the set. I got very lucky with Craving Power, and I think I got it like pick 3. So definitely consider this card even out of aspect. Next is Army of the Dead. It's just a stats beast. I don't think I even played it once. I think I always resourced it. Like, it's fine, but my deck was trying to be like a little bit aggro-y. So I never really played this card. I usually resource it. That being said, I think you do sometimes play this card. Like, it's a fine card, but yeah, it's just okay. It's exactly as you expect. Then we have Trident Assault Ship. I played this card again at pre-release. It was awesome. You know, it was able to kill whatever my opponent had in space and also get through to base. And then if they couldn't deal with it in like a turn or 2, it just won the game, right? Because you're doming them for 6 every turn with your 6/3 that killed their space unit and still got in for 3, right? Very good card. Obviously not first pickable, but you know, it's what I would consider great filler. Next, we have the Sun, which won me like 3 games. So this card is exceptionally good. Like I said, I don't usually have the Force in this deck, but by the 7 resource turn, I did regularly have the Force. And that's because, of course, I was attacking with Snoke by then. The only cards in my deck that used the Force were like Shatterpoint, which I'd probably used by then, or Resourced, Daggerian Master, which maybe I hadn't drawn yet. Like, I would often have the Sun or the Force by the time I played the Sun, and even if I didn't, he's able to give you the Force by attacking. And if I had like a lot of things on board, which I usually did, I usually had like 3 things on board, and then I played the Sun, that usually just closes the game immediately, right? It just changed the combat math entirely. I think the 2 of the 3 games that the Sun won me, I think we both had like wide boards, and my opponent was, you know, had calculated that if I were to swing out onto base, they would still have like 6 HP left, and they would be able to win on a backswing. And if, you know, if I were to start taking out their units, then they could maybe trade profitably. But then I just dropped the Sun, and now, oh, I actually just have lethal on the board, and now they must deal with my units in an unprofitable way, because this +2/+0 is not just when attacking, it's always, right? So they had to deal, good luck dealing with the Sun at 8 HP, right? They had to deal with my other units, and that would just like, you know, and then I could just attack with the Sun for 8 next turn and probably close the game. No, this card was exceptional. It pretty much always won me the game, like the turn I played it or the first action on the next turn. Exceptional card, and definitely first pickable. Although, yes, I did first pick. This is my pack 3 pick 1, so I got pretty lucky on the card opening there. And then last I have It's Worse, which again, this is just 7 cost Vanquish. Is that good enough? Maybe. Did I ever use it? Yes, twice. Is it better than Shatterpoint? In this deck, yes. In general, absolutely not. I think that the Shatterpoint is like a much better version of this effect. But, I mean, obviously, right, it's 4 instead of 7 for like basically the same effect. But nevertheless, in this deck, It's Worse was better. That's funny to say. And I think that this card is, while not first pickable, something that I would take probably higher than most people just because I think removal is so good, right? Like when your opponent drops the Sun, pretty much your only way to deal with that is something like It's Worse, unless, again, you have like really good force package with Shatterpoint. Good. So that is the deck. So my first match was against a Grand Inquisitor deck, and it was a very aggro deck. The opponent also was very good. And I ended up winning that game because we both were just going aggro, and then I dropped the Sun, right? Like, you know, I think both of our games actually, definitely the first game, maybe the second game, it was a 1 life point difference, and it was the Sun always that made up that life point. So it was just, they were very close games. I feel a little bit bad because they just kind of got out-bombed, but sometimes that's how draft goes. And of course, yeah, Craving Power on Snoke always felt incredible and was a real issue to deal with, like I said, because then that's immediately 9 HP, and then as soon as Snoke attacks, it's 10, right? That's very difficult to deal with. And then, of course, it's a leader, so it dodges Shatterpoint, and it's worse and everything like that. Yeah, great matches, and Inquisitor was definitely very tough. My opponent had a little bit of a creature package too, so they had like Pounce for like surprise damage, and I think one of the games, if they top decked Pounce, they actually would have won, but they did not, so lucky me, and that is how that one went. My second game was against Mother Talzin, which I think, as I've mentioned in the past, is one of the stronger leaders for draft in this format. That one went a little bit smoother. I just was able to keep a lot better control of the board than in that Grand Inquisitor match, and I was able to just, once again, slam Sun on 7 and just swing out for lethal. Yeah, keeping board control was very good in that match, and weirdly, charging Philac was like kind of the all-star in that match. I kept a lot of board control charging Philac. But of course, Talzin, great deck. They had that Talzin's Assassins card, incredible common. Good. And then my third game was against Obi-Wan Kenobi, and unfortunately, I actually lost that one, although it was very close. And I think I just lost it to I just got out aggroed. That deck was very aggressive, and they went very wide, and I really couldn't deal with that, and they just kind of overwhelmed me and got me. And so yeah, great games at draft, and I learned a lot. The Obi-Wan game in particular, the wideness sort of spread across both arenas, and that was something I was worried about in this deck. You may notice that I am very limited on the space arena, right? I have the Trident Assault Ship, and I have Exegol Patroller, and really like... oh, and I guess Legacy Run, and that's kind of it, right? And they managed to get sort of a decent presence in both arenas, and were able to overwhelm me like that. So great games, and definitely keep an eye out on that space stuff for sure. The biggest lesson I learned from this draft was pivoting early, which I, in theory, already knew, but yeah, this is just sort of another data point in favor of that, right? If you see partway through pack 1 that like one color seems to be really open, you should probably be in that color, you know? There may be a set in the future where one color is just so unplayable that you really don't want to be in it, but that set is not this set. This set, even though yellow probably is the weakest color, like it's not by such a wide margin that if it's open, you don't want to be in it. If yellow is open, it's still the best color. Then, you know, there are situations, right? Famously in Magic, the Gathering, the Lord of the Rings set, Simic, which is blue-green, was so bad. That even if it was so cleanly open and nobody was taking a single Simic card, you probably still shouldn't be taking the Simic Scry package. I think famously at one of the Pro Tours, LSV was a Spotlight draft. This is actually, I think you can go watch this video, and you should, it's awesome. LSV is a very famous Magic professional, and he was being handed all of the best Simic cards in that Lord of the Rings draft. And he was taking them, and he built an awesome Simic Scry deck. And I think he had like multiple copies of the legendaries for that archetype, which is unheard of in draft. Just nobody was taking any of this stuff, and he had the perfect deck. And of course, LSV is a very good drafter. That's like his thing that he's even, I would argue, like the most known for is his cubing ability. And you know, draft and cube are very similar in a lot of ways. So he's very good at that thing. So great player. Great deck, very opened archetype, and like very good luck on the actual cards past him, because even in a certain sealed pool, sometimes the legendaries for a certain archetype aren't opened, but multiple were for him, and I think he went 0-3. So there are situations where that happens, you know, where you're an exceptional player and you get an exceptional package, and the archetype just sucks so much that you just lose every game. Now, that was a bit of a tangent, and that was sort of to illustrate that this is not that, you know. Yellow is not bad. It's just probably a little bit weaker than the other ones. But that shouldn't scare you away like it kind of a little bit scared me away in pack 1. But yeah, once I saw in pack 2 how open it was, I just was like, okay, I'm getting like pick 6 Shin Hatis. Okay, yeah, we're going into yellow here. All right, so overall thoughts, the pre-release leaders continue to dominate. So leaders like Snoke, Obi-Wan, Talzin, those leaders are still, I would say, the strongest. At pre-release, sometimes the leaders that are strongest change to draft, because pre-release tends to be a slightly slower format. And then also you have access to those spotlight leaders like Maul and Qui-Gon in this set, and that can kind of change a little bit the meta. But I think in this particular instance, they continue to impress. The the leaders that were dominant at pre-release remain dominant. So I think you ought to be leaning into those when you can. But of course, like I said about that whole Simic rant a minute ago, I don't think there's like, well, other than the obvious ones, Revan and Anakin, I don't think there's any leader that's like unplayably bad, such that if you're giving the exact package for them, you shouldn't be playing that leader, right? I don't think there's any leader like that except for, again, Anakin and Revan. I think the ones you should try to build towards are probably still the same as at pre-release, and that's, not Qui-Gon, Obi-Wan and Snoke and Talzin. And if you really get there, you could do a Kit Fisto. Kanan is decent. There's more. That's not an exhaustive list, but that's some of them. I was just talking trash about Revan and Anakin, but at my pre-release, actually, or not my pre-release, at this draft, not in my pod, but in the other pod, one of the guys who is actually coming to Galactic, and he's a very good player, so, props to him. He built the Revan deck. And he went 2-1. He went 2-1 with the Revan deck. So mad props to that guy. That is incredible. That is absolutely incredible. So mad shout out there. But there was someone at my table who tried the Anakin deck and unfortunately did not get there, which, again, that's not their fault. I just think that the Anakin and Revan decks are it's just tough. It's just tough to do in Limited. But, hey, the Revan deck could 2-1, but my recommendation remains you should not try that if you're trying to win. But if you're trying to have a good time with Revan, then by all means go for it. I think he had Malik, but don't quote me on that. So overall thoughts, again, removal continues to be premium. There's a couple of really good shielded units like Secret of Sage and Shin Hati, so removal like Whirlwind of Power is very good because it just kind of goes through shields. Obviously, I think Shatterpoint is still incredible, even though in my deck it really didn't work out. I think that It's Worse is a card that's going to be underdrafted because people will think that, I didn't get the other piece that makes, the combos with It's Worse, but I think that's fine, and I think that piece is bad. So, in fact, actually, I'm going to do in my cards I was most wrong about, I'll be talking about that. Removal is premium, but we all knew that. Craving Power, again, it's removal and it's a buff. I think it's like the best card in the set, or one of the best cards in the set. So, aggro is good as well. So, Jump to Lightspeed had an interesting meta where aggro was good, but what the games really revolved around was your leader's flip turn and can they pilot a good ship. And games were decided based on that. Because if your opponent was trying to aggro you down and you got a really good flip on your leader, you could usually just deal with them, right? Deal with whatever their smaller ships that they had all just fired out early on at you. Not always, but oftentimes you could do that. And that's not to say that, again, aggro was still good in Jump to Lightspeed, but I think aggro is better here just because there's not any of those big stops to that, with one exception, obviously. If you pull Chirrut, that can really stop aggro in its tracks, especially if you're able to maintain the force. But I don't think I saw any Chirruts this week. I might be wrong about that. I don't think so, though. And yeah, so I think that aggro is very good, and you should probably be leaning into more aggressive decks than usual. But again, super early. I've done one draft. I'll keep posted on that. And then how good is Force Control? I think Force Control is very good. It stops your opponent from doing, having a really good Shatterpoint. It stops your opponent from drawing cards with Kadimundi or killing one of your things with Mace Windu, right? There's a lot of cards that are at common and uncommon that use the Force. And if you're able to keep your opponent off of that, it can make their turns really awkward, kind of like in Constructed right now. So I think that it is important, but it's also possible that depending on how you built your deck, just aggroing your opponent down is more important than Force Control. Keep that in mind. Again, watch out for Chirrut. If you're aggroing them down and they are getting the Force consistently and then they slam Chirrut, you're probably just going to lose that game. So keep that in mind. If they're in blue, maybe pay a little bit more attention to Force Control than if they're in another archetype. I haven't been making quite as many videos here. You probably have noticed it's because Galactic is coming up, and I have been spending a lot of time practicing for Galactic. And I'm actually, in just a few minutes here, going to be shooting another video that will probably go up a day after this one about Galactic and what I've been doing to prepare for that, and some thoughts that I'm having about how to survive such a long tournament. But that is all the thoughts I had on the first draft. I'm really excited to draft more of this set. I think it's going to be a really fun set, and I will continue to yap and share my thoughts here. So thank you so much for watching, and as always, may the Force be with you.
So what I told you was true. from a certain point of view.
A certain point of view?